Beth, accountability in the classroom. How do you know you got a good teacher there? How do you measure it?
Evaluation. And as Margaret said, you have more than one way to evaluate a teacher, whether they are performing there. And you have to look and see if your teachers need to have improvement and give them the development process that they need to better themselves.
In terms of accountability, Margaret mentioned the Ames test. I want to get your thoughts on the Ames test, A. And B, there are critics of that particular test that say basically what you're teaching students to do is to be better test takers as opposed to giving them a better education. How would you respond?
Well, before we get to that, I think this issue of teacher accountability is absolutely paramount to improving our schools. There are standard systems called 360-degree review, peer evaluation, and when those have been put into school, they are very powerful techniques for motivating teachers to improve. Peers are much tougher on their fellow teachers than principals have been. That's the track record for years and years in education. Systematically, we need to propagate that concept of quarterly reviews of a teacher by her peers and have money hanging on that. When you do that, it becomes a very positive feedback cycle that moves schools ahead. Now, to go to the issue of the Ames test, we need to do a number of things. We've had evaluation of our math standards. Those came in at less than excellent. We need to make sure our standards move smoothly so we can move a child to excellence in mathematic achievement so that we have very top-notch standards. So we need to do a review of our math standards. We also then need to integrate that into Ames. Further, we need to integrate into Ames a history component, one that teaches students about the history of our great nation, respect for the Constitution, and also the tremendous contribution of our founding fathers. So there are a number of improvements that we need to make in Ames to bring it up to par.
But again, but the critics say that you're getting test takers. You're teaching kids, you're teaching to the test, and kids are taking test-related questions and courses, but they're not necessarily getting a better education. How did you respond to that?
Well, first of all, we have the academic standards that have been adopted by our State Board of Education. In order to test those standards, or you have to find out whether our teachers are teaching those academic standards and of whether or not our students are learning those standards. And the only way you can do that is through an assessment or a test. And every animal on the face of the earth can successfully teach their young what they want them to learn. The only animal that cannot do that is the human animal. And so if we want to know what we want our kids to learn, we have to identify what it is we want them to learn. And that's what the academic standards have done, and that's what the Ames test is doing. It is an identification of what do we want our students to be able to do at the end of each year. Those are the academic standards, and then you build an assessment. And that's what validates each grade level for teachers, what it is they are accountable for teaching our students at each grade level. And it's not just teaching the test, but it's teaching the content of that test. And that's important for us as citizens to make sure that our teachers are accountable for teaching the content to our students.
Ames test, keep it or lose it?
Right now we'd have to keep it because it takes a tremendous amount of effort to develop a test like that. I don't support going to NAEP, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which is supported by the Department of Education. I think our Ames test is much better than that, and I have graded assessments under NAEP, and the Ames is better, but I would like to see the next level go to learning outcomes, establishing the teachers in learning communities and work on learning outcomes. We were very successful in that in the community college.
Okay.
The thing that you really want in your testing system is movement over time. You really want to hold schools accountable, not just for where their student is at the end of the year, but where do they move them from and to. And that is absolutely key. The Florida reforms focused on that. They put much more of their weight in holding schools accountable and school districts. Where are you moving the students? If a school moves a student from the 30th to the 35th percentile, and they're doing that across many students, and they're doing that year after year, moving them ahead, That's an excellent school, even though this child came to them at a very low level of academic achievement. That improvement system is absolutely key. If we discard AIMS, we lose our longitudinal database. But we have to do some very key improvements in AIMS. We have to make it much more accurate at the upper end, our students above the 85th percentile, and we need to make it much more accurate at the lower end. It is very inaccurate in those ranges, and that prevents us from improving our accountability.
And what we've already done at the Department of Education is move to a growth model, is finding out where the students come into us and where they have grown in 1 year. And that's very important for all of our schools to be viewed and be held accountable for, especially our schools in our low socioeconomic areas. But we need to also be very careful that we also look at absolute growth as well as continuous improvement. So we need to look at both ends for the absolute passing and also the growth model to ensure that we just don't rest on growth as the only indicator.
Florida has been mentioned a couple of times here. Some would say that Florida has success in academics and education because Florida spends more money per pupil than Arizona does. Lots of states do.
Right.
The numbers are flying around out there, but we're certainly not at the top or near the top of that list. Are Arizona revenues enough to meet education needs? Are we doing enough in terms of spending on education, public education?
Well, I think one of the big areas that we really need to review is how we're spending our money. I think the Auditor General came back and said 57%, 50 cents of the dollar is going to the classroom. I would like to see that go to at least 70 cents of the dollar go into the classroom. Where are we spending our money, and make sure that the classroom has more of the dollar that is being spent than 57 cents of the dollar.
That would suggest that you think we are spending enough money on education.
It's how we're spending our money. I think this is what's happening in many of our low socioeconomic schools. When they aren't progressing, we have vendors that come into these schools and sell them more products that they don't necessarily need. We know more about reading, teaching the reading and the teaching of math than we've ever known. And yet we keep changing the way we teach reading or a new program, and basically it's the same way, but it's just a new packaging, and we spend more and more money with these vendors, and we need to get back to teaching, good basic teaching, because that is what really is the magic. It's the magician in the classroom and not the wand that we continue to change. Going to Florida.
I need to stop you right there. John, are we spending enough as far as education is concerned?